Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today on this beautiful, what is it? Are we in April? Almost tax day, April morning. This is such an important time. We're lucky enough to be, a month or so out of one of the biggest blitz events in the year. International Roadcheck, CVSA puts on quite the event here across North America, and it's a blitz that you really can't escape unless you choose to just park your trucks. And I don't think that's the smart thing to do these days. So we are excited to be here to talk with Jonathan Bashirs from Nirvana. He's the safety program lead, and of course Mark Ray, who's been with Frozen Food Express and Lisa Motor for 35 plus years and now is joining us today so that we can hear about all the things we need to do to prepare for Roadcheck and really what the impact is on your operations beyond the Blitz week, because it's not just a one and done deal. It's something that's going to stick with you for the rest of the year and beyond. So sit back and relax, pop into chat, and oh, I'm echoing. Uh-oh. Let's see. Let me see if I can get my a little bit better for you. How's this? This working? Hello from Texarkana. So join us in chat if you would. And nope, still not working. Mark, Jonathan, can y'all hear me all right?
Yep, sounds good.
Hear me okay? Okay. Well, we'll keep moving. If you will jump in the chat, let us know where you are, and feel free to ask questions throughout. We're going to take questions at the end and do our best to answer everyone, but there's a lot to cover here. So with that, Jonathan, Mark, welcome. I did a quick introduction of Jonathan, but let me just add, he's yes, the safety program lead for Nirvana Insurance, but he has a deep experience in the trucking world. He was in state DOT enforcement, so he's been on that side of inspections many a time. And he's also worked in compliance for a Fortune 300 fleet. Now he covers risk and loss control and safety with Nirvana. So I think he's been in all seats here and has a lot of great information to share. Jonathan, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Lydia and Mark, for letting me join y'all and talk through, like Lydia said, one of the biggest enforcement events that CVSA and roadside inspectors do. Um, it's something that covers North America, it's Mexico, United States, Canada. So you're not going to escape it unless you somehow put your truck on a boat or just shut down. So it's a 72-hour blitz running May 12th through the 14th, 24 hours a day for 3 days. It's hard to run from it. It's going to be everywhere that you see. There's going to be pop-up inspection sites at normal way stations that you might have seen closed, um, rest areas, back roads, on the backside of way stations. They're really going to be everywhere. And so, talking about the scale of it, there's nearly 15 trucks that are inspected every single minute across the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. So you're going to see a lot of officers on the road doing those inspections. And so the focus is really cargo securement and ELD tampering. But that's not going to be the only thing that they focus on. That is just the primary thing that they're looking at. But they're still going to be doing those level one inspections, which is a 37-step process. So they're going to be checking your logbook, your fuel receipts, inside your cab, your seatbelt, your windshield, making sure you don't have anything covering, where the wipers are, making sure that you don't have fuel leaks, bad tires, lights. They're going to be doing a full level one inspection. And so, for context, in 2025, they did over 56,000 inspections during that 72 hours, and over 18% of the vehicles and over 5% of the drivers were placed out of service. So, those are vehicles and drivers that weren't squared away whenever they got stopped. So, in 2026, we talked about cargo securement. That's going to be the primary vehicle focus that these officers are going to be talking through. And then ELD tampering, falsification, personal conveyance, manipulation. That's really where they're going to be diving in more than they normally do on a typical inspection. So, why does this event matter? It's because a single out of service event, a single violation, doesn't just park the truck. You're going to miss loads. You're going to have upset customers because the load didn't make it there on time because the driver or the vehicle got shut down. You're going to have increased roadside maintenance costs because we know if you maintain it yourself or you maintain it at the shop that you're used to, you're typically going to save money. But if you have that roadside repair person come out, add a couple $100, $1,000 to what you're doing, and you're going to see that cost go up. Then you're going to see your CSA score get damaged. So at 72 hours, if you have multiple violations, multiple inspections, quickly the next time you get a snapshot, you're going to see those scores go in the wrong direction. And then from an insurance renewal risk, worse CSA scores means that you're going to have to come to that renewal decision, that insurance decision, and say, hey, this is what I had happen during this event. Here's why I wasn't prepared for it. And here's what I've done to fix it. And so it's going to kind of put a red flag on your CSA risk that wouldn't have been there had we been prepared for it.
Yes. So we wanted to ask, because this is not just, this is a one-time blitz, sure, once a year, but you're at risk anytime the wheels are running. And so we did just want to ask the audience of everyone who's participated, have you had an out of service event in the last 12 months? And if you have, what kind or what kinds? There are, of course, the most common ones. Jonathan, what did you see most frequently in your time?
Yeah, load securement was the big one of just
Yeah.
either not securing the load or having damaged securement. And then from a log standpoint, it was like general form and manner were your typical violations, but violation of like your 11, your 14, which now some people are trying to hide using personal conveyance. So
Mhm.
you're actually going to see a resurgence of those violations now that officers are really digging in using tools to find like what's happening.
Mark, you're nodding your head. I think you've seen your fair share too. Anything to add?
I have another one that's documents. You know, your medical having a current medical card. I see that one all the time, and it's just totally preventable.
Yep. Okay, so let's keep rolling here. Whoops. Let me close this out and keep rolling because, as you said, Jonathan, we have two focus areas for the vehicle itself, cargo securement, and for the driver, ELD tampering, falsification, and manipulation. So again, that doesn't mean that's all that's going to be inspected, but those are going to be the focus areas. And up first in our focus area, ELD integrity. So I think, again, hearing back from you all in chat this time, what I know you all have crazy stories. What are those crazy ELD stories? What kind of wild workarounds have you seen? Because there's always, where there's a will, there's always a workaround. I just was watching CBS 60 Minutes covered, on a segment on carriers and was talking about companies that will get in on the back end and actually zero out the hours so that they can start running again after their 11 hours is up and just keep on moving. So we know there are workarounds. If anybody has any stories to share, we always love hearing them. Mark, what, in your experience, what have you seen as an ELD
Well,
workaround?
the big target is personal conveyance, of course. And I know one carrier actually ended up in a lawsuit where he would run, and they had their PC set at 40 miles, and this particular driver would drive 39 miles and then log on under personal conveyance. And then at the end of his work day, he would log out and drive another 39 miles so he wouldn't trigger the 40-mile limit. And he did this day after day after day after day. That's not what PC was designed for, obviously. Have another lawsuit that I'm aware of that I participated in where a driver literally went from San Bernardino, California to Dallas, Texas on personal conveyance. Now, obviously, that's not the intent, but there are many interpretations of personal conveyance. So I would assume, Jonathan, you correct me if I'm wrong, that our CVSA officers and our highway patrolmen know about that, and they're going to look pretty close at abuse of that personal conveyance.
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to really dive in more than they're used to. They're going to be asking for your bills of lading, your receipts, and then comparing that to your logs. I know a crazy story for me that I've seen, and I wouldn't recommend it because it's easily able to be caught. Is had a driver that was running some like extra loads on the side, and so not running it through the business that they were operating for. And so let's just say they'd go to the truck stop and they park and then they would unplug their ELD. And so that GPS location would die at that truck stop. They would go run their, short load and then come back, plug back in at that truck stop. And so from a GPS location standpoint, GPS lined up from off to on, but you would see a mileage discrepancy. And so that's why, like on the safety manager side, it's so important to have reports that are catching those discrepancies. Because if you're not going through it, manually with a fine tooth comb, it's going to be hard to miss there. Um, Lydia, did we get any responses back on the personal conveyance?
We sure did. Yeah, let's see. We had 67% said, yes, we do allow personal conveyance. And when asked about the policy, 67% have a policy. So it looks like everyone who allows it at least has a policy about it. I heard a policy in boot camp once that was as simple as if you can Uber it, you can PC it. I don't know how that holds up in court or holds up with your insurance provider, but at least it's something. What do you see from the insurance angle, Jonathan, about personal conveyance?
I think it's one of those the big ones that if you're going to allow it, you need to have very strict guidelines around it. But then you also have to have the proactive step of reporting on it. Because if you're in violation of FMCSA reg, especially your hours of service, and you're involved in a collision or a claim, and the lawyer or the officer can point towards you shouldn't have been on the road at the time of that accident,
Mhm.
and if you weren't there, the accident wouldn't have happened. You're opening yourself up to just massive litigation and some of these nuclear verdicts that you're seeing today. Of you're not doing the right thing, then it's going to add up, then it's going to cost you. And so when you're really thinking about it from a cost of the business standpoint, is on time rushing a driver, worth maybe not getting fined $100 by the receiver or the shipper for not getting it there on time, or is the $2 million lawsuit once you've been involved in a claim because you're rushing to get a load? Like where's the upside there? And so I think you always want to make sure that from a dispatcher standpoint, you're not rushing a driver to get anywhere on point. Like you're looking at their hours of service and not putting them in a situation where it's either fail, not get the load there on time, or get wrote up because they didn't get it there and really pressuring the driver. And so,
Mhm.
from an insurance perspective, we don't want to see false logs. We don't want to see personal conveyance because that's where you're putting profit above safety. And safety is the number one thing from an insurance risk standpoint that we're looking at.
I would also add, Lydia, that the custom content feature for Infinity is very good to be able to communicate to your driver what your policy is.
Mhm.
In the event of an accident and a deposition, the driver normally is going to say, "Nobody told me. I didn't know I could," what the policy was on personal conveyance. And it sure helps to have a documented training, custom training content that explains in detail what your company's uh,
Yes.
policy is relative to personal conveyance rather than
The
having the
dreaded nobody
driver.
told me. Yes. And that's
Nobody told me.
it's
Yep,
people
that's
are going to say it. And everywhere you turn, drivers are going to say it. I mean, anybody, honestly, in the workforce who's caught doing something is going to say, "Oh, nobody told me." I think, Jonathan's point here on the screen about the difference between unintentional violations or really good old-fashioned confusion and negligence is what you want to look out here for. So yeah, just as you said, Mark, making sure that not only do you have it defined and documented, but it's also you can lay hands on the proof that you delivered it is important. How often, Jonathan, you see confusion, like true legitimate confusion?
I think a lot of the confusion is surrounding, all right, can I once I've dropped my load, can I go home? Or can I leave my house and go pick up the load? Um, especially if they have their trailer and can't drop it. And so then are you lading, are you unlading? I think it's kind of the confusion there. And then this new piece with ELDs that you didn't have with paper logs is like these yard moves of as soon as you start your truck up and it goes over what I think typically like 5 miles an hour, it's going to trigger that you're in on duty status. And if you're operating around the yard or a mechanic operating your truck. And so it's really important that every time you log into your device, going in and either certifying or annotating your logs to ensure accuracy. And don't let the officer have questions roadside and asking you what something was. Already have it annotated because that means that you're squared away and you identified it and you made the mark. And then working with your dispatcher to make sure that's all corrected. I think
Mhm.
from like the safety manager standpoint, and the reason that we're having this webinar almost a month ahead of time is making sure that we're going ahead, and if we're not already on top of our ELDs, that we're on top of it, starting today. And so that's by running those weekly unassigned driving reports. So if a driver's not in there in the truck logged in, but you're seeing mileage, making sure that we're running that report, assigning it to whoever it's supposed to be assigned to, and having the driver accept that assignment. And then, Mark, you mentioned the 40 miles and the driver going 39. Like running a personal conveyance report to see who is running personal conveyance. And then if it doesn't meet your policy, if your policy says you can use personal conveyance for these two things and it doesn't fall within that category, holding that driver accountable, making sure that education is there with the driver, and then treating your roadside or your hours of service report violations the same as if a roadside violation occurred. Because if you see a violation today for personal conveyance that is a violation, and that driver is stopped in the next 8 days, that's a violation that you're going to get roadside if the officer sees it. So making sure that we're training the drivers on those violations so that hopefully you can prevent those going forward. So when you go into road check, you know what violations exist, you know what you could have, but you've already worked on preventing them. And so hopefully you make it through road check and continued for the next years and not having those types of violations.
I know we're supposed to hold questions to the end, but Aaron commented, about can a driver use PC to drive home after unloading per regulations? And the regulations are pretty broad on PC. It's really left to the company to define. Now you have to stick to hours of service rules and regs, but I think it's a double-edged sword. A good thing and a bad thing is that PC is pretty broad, right? So you got to have a policy, but only if you're going to enforce it.
Yeah, and I'll drop a link in the chat. But FMCSA has like frequently asked questions surrounding personal conveyance, and ultimately whether you agree with them or not, like that's what dictates what a driver can do. And so for that exact example, there's a question that says, may a driver who drops his or her last load at a receiver's facility use personal conveyance to return to their normal work location, so home or terminal? And it says no. Returning home or to the terminal from a dispatch trip is a continuation of the trip and therefore cannot be considered personal conveyance. You're going to have officers that have different interpretations of FMCSA's FAQs, and one officer might allow or another officer might not. But it comes down to the letter of the law and what FMCSA has said. Follow it, because that's going to protect you no matter who you come into contact with and what their interpretation is. Because if you follow FMCSA's regulations and their guidelines interpretations, that even if you get a violation roadside or something that you follow, you can always file a data queue and have that training session and accountability back with enforcement. But follow what the regulation says, and you should be squared away.
So like Mark said, it's a lot to cover here, but because this is Infinity's webinar, we're just going to do our plug for assigning that training. We have a new video coming out actually, I think it's this Friday or Monday, on ELD tampering and falsification. Last year, we always release new content. Every month we release new content. Last year, just ahead of road check, we did one on records of duty status and ghost drivers. So there's a lot of content already that's available that can be assigned out. And this is short, like we do short to the point. We're talking about, 6 minutes on average, sometimes 2 or 3 minutes, just to reinforce the information and make sure everyone is aware. And as Mark said, uploading your own specific policies, really important to make sure that you have acknowledgments for that. And that can be assigned, documented, tracked, so you can, run a report if it's ever called into question. If there's ever a situation where, you need to answer in an audit, hopefully not, or an accident, God forbid, you can at least pull the records of that. So very easy to get everyone prepped on, the basic regulations and the letters of the law, and then also the behavioral best practice as they're out on the road. And that brings us now to focus area number 2, cargo securement. And this is a big one last year. I saw, what was it? Last year, it was the number 1 or number 2 issue that popped on road check, right?
Yeah, I think it was over 34,000 violations tied to road securement.
Yeah, man. So before going into this section, we wanted to hear from you all. Do you have load securement training? And if you do, what does it look like? Is it hands-on? Is it virtual? Do you use your own content? Um, do you do it, but just only in orientation and that's it, one and done? That's, I think, a common thing that we see with fleets that are trying to build their program is a lot of focus on orientation, but not on that recurring ongoing. And, as equipment changes, as your clients and contracts change, as loads change, you need to revisit that and make sure that you're staying on top of, the safest way to move your cargo. Looks like this poll ended here with 43% yes, they offer recurring load securement training, and 38% only in orientation. So mixed house here. Let's just
Yeah,
jump in.
I think the big thing on load securement is making sure that you do it and you're doing it for the specific item that's being hauled.
Mhm.
If you're only training your driver to do haul like reefer freight, but then the next day you're hauling paper rolls within that reefer's the reefer turned off, and the driver's
Yeah.
not trained on the securement of that, you're going to be getting a violation. But if you're not secured right, that could also lend itself to a collision due to like the freight moving. And so making sure that your drivers are trained in what they're hauling, I think is the biggest piece, but also recurring. So Lydia, like using y'all's system to do the
Mhm.
training that you've put together, but putting in the custom training. If you're hauling steel pipe every day, making sure the drivers are aware of that, and doing recurring virtual training, but also in person, hands on, making sure drivers know what damage securement looks like, what the correct usage of tie downs looks like, um,
Yep.
and then documenting that they're doing it. I think is important.
Yeah, you'd think that we'd be a virtual only house here, but no, hands-on, to have a healthy training programs and safety program. Yes, there are so many benefits to online. I could preach that all day long, but at some point you do need to get your hands on the actual equipment, make sure that everyone knows what they're doing, test things out, get comfortable with it, because that's real life day-to-day operations is the actual doing it.
Yeah, and I think the second piece to that is like you're doing the training. Now let's make sure that we're doing the train what we've learned in training and we're actually doing that roadside when we're getting loaded.
Yep.
And so whether that's the driver doing their DVIR and you're adding something to it where they're having to check that they secured something properly, or really what I would say the next 30 days is if you're hauling something that's maybe a little more complex when it comes to securement, you're using tie downs, straps, um, more than just like one or two load bars holding your freight to the front, is having drivers like, hey, send me a photo of the next time you get your load secured, and really spot checking those. And that's going to prepare you for road check of knowing, hey, these are the defects that we found for the last 3 or 4 weeks. We've corrected them. And so going into road check, we're clear. Our drivers know what they're supposed to be doing. I think it kind of goes back to some of the ELD stuff is it's not, they're not securing the load on purpose. It's maybe
Mhm.
just complacency of, well, this is the way that we've always done it, kind of that travel knowledge and not actually having the hands-on training. And so if you can train over the next few weeks and have those pictures, that kind of creates accountability, gives you a record if an officer does stop you, and you can say, well, here's a photo of what the load looked like when the officer inspected it, and it meets the FMCSA requirements, it meets CVSA's requirements, then you can always data queue that. But if you don't have photos of how the load was secured, it's kind of, my word against yours on was it actually secured the right way. But a load that looked right when you picked it up might not look right 150 miles down the road. Uh, I'm sure, Mark, you've seen this of load leaves and 200 miles on the road that strap's gotten loose. And so really the way that I recommend is, hey, in the first like 50 to 100 miles you're stopping and checking that load, retightening everything, especially something where you're using chains or binders that are going to just become loose because the cargo's moved a little bit, and then rechecking it every 150 miles, or hey, you got to stop and get something to drink, or stop at the truck stop. Doesn't hurt to do a quick pre-trip while you're there at the truck stop, just to save yourself a ticket or an accident down the road.
Yes, and I've seen some very good custom content on load securement in adverse weather. Rainstorms, nights. You know, uh, they're going to be subjected to doing that under some very adverse conditions, and having them think about that ahead of time and how to do that. Even the container guys, they're picking up the containers at the ports and at the uh, rail yards. They can very easily not get a good connection, and a loose container going down the road is not a very good thing to happen.
It's not. What's cool is CVSA. They're typically the ones that govern enforcement and have like their own inspection um, guidelines. And you can go there. You can go to like cvsa.org and go in, and they'll have certain things for inspectors of how they're supposed to inspect intermodal containers or how they're supposed to inspect metal coils. And you can actually go in there and see how the officer is going to inspect it, and that will help you do your hands-on training because you know what the officer's looking for, and if you can teach your driver exactly what they're looking for, it should ensure that you're loading everything correctly.
Very good. So building into pre-trips, I know everyone groans, do you do a pre-trip? Well, we're supposed to, and it's kind of a question of did we catch the driver? And accountability is the hard part of that
Mhm.
on all sides. So, if you have the technology to make it easy on driver to capture, but then there also has to be the reporting and the technology for the administrator side so you can actually stay on top of it and hold them accountable. And I know there's data fatigue now. You have reports coming out of your ears. Is there a reasonable way, Mark and Jonathan, both of you, is there a reasonable way to stay on top of that to really enforce or have some accountability behind pre-trips or even, mid-trip checks?
I think for me, what I've seen, there's tons of technology out there. There's new companies popping up left and right, advertising this new way to do, DVIRs, and there's a couple of things where you can scan a QR code, walk around the truck and scan a QR code. But what stops me or from a driver just running around and still doing my 5 minute one and doing so? You obviously have to have an ELD. That's something that FMCSA mandated, but a lot of these companies are really putting tools for you to use, not just that you had to use, making it a better experience for you. And so what I've seen in probably some of the top 3 to 5 telematics providers is the ability to make a driver take a photo when they inspect something, or if they find a defect, take a picture. I saw a demo here the other day where you can actually set it up where when a driver goes to inspect an axle, it shows them what a good axle should look like, where there's no leaking parts. And so the driver compares the photo that they looked at to what they're actually seeing, and they would know if there was a violation or not. Um, and so I think that's like the really cool technology piece. What I've also seen worked is doing mock pre-trips. And
Mhm.
so like if you own a truck, you have a spare truck sitting at your shop, go out there and throw some fake defects on it of like, hey, here's my top 10 violations I've received as a company. I've received flat tires and cracked brake drums, whatever the case is, putting that on there. And then on a like quarterly cadence with your drivers, hey, your driver showed up to do the 34 reset or to have maintenance done on their truck, whatever the case is. Hey, why don't you go out there and do a pre-trip real quick and come back and tell me what you found? Because you're going to know by doing that what violations they're finding, what violations they're not, and specifically the violations they're not finding, you can train on that. If they're not finding a leaking wheel seal, well, then you can do hands-on training of here's how you identify a leaking wheel seal next time you do a pre-trip. Mark, what have you seen work?
Well, I've used carrots and sticks, and some things work for some drivers and some don't. It's all across the board. But I think just all the technologies out there, the mandatory 15 minutes, but you also got to keep in mind sometimes these guys are in sandstorms and they're in snowstorms, and um, it's a never ending challenge that we have as an industry to do an adequate pre-trip. I think it's gotten better. It's certainly got a long way to go. the second the component that's a benefit from a pre-trip it mentally prepares the driver for his driving experience. If he or she in fact does a good roads pre-trip inspection, mentally they're preparing for an important event, which is going online, going on duty, and driving a commercial truck. So um, I wish I had the magic button to punch to say this works all the time and you can do it. It's a tough one to get done on a consistent basis. And I will also say it's an easy one for our friends in the plaintiff's world to drag you across the coals in a lawsuit if you don't do everything that you're supposed to be doing on a pre-trip relative to violations that are found.
I would highly. Oh, sorry, Lydia.
No, go ahead, John.
I would highly encourage just drivers when you're stopping, safety measures, like when you talking with your drivers. Anytime a driver stops, they should be doing a walk around inspection, whether that's at a truck stop or um, they parked at a shipper or receiver, doing a quick walk around, especially if you stayed overnight somewhere. What I've seen, and you would hope that this wouldn't happen, but what I've seen is a driver park at a truck stop and another driver or just another person has come up and messed with that driver's load, whether that's like loosening a tie down or flipping a placard that was visible and now it's no longer visible. And then that driver, wakes up, starts the truck, and starts going down the road and never does another pre-trip. They're going to get caught for that violation, and they know, like, hey, I had this load secured, I had that placard on, whatever the case is. There's no way this violation happened. Well, someone's messed with their load, or you know, talking about tires. Of you could have hit a nail, right before you got into the truck stop, and the next morning the tire's flat, or you stop for fuel, and just doing that walk around is going to protect you because you never know. You typically know where the way stations are if you're taking the same routes, but you never know where that officer's going to be sitting for a random, level 3, level 2, level 1 inspection. So you have to always be prepared, not just be prepared for the areas that you know about, be prepared because especially during road check, you don't know where they're going to be set up, and they're going to be going over that full level 1.
I think be prepared and proactive is kind of the name of the game across all of
Yeah.
this. I mean, really anything, not just for road check, but proactive is best. Because this is, I know you're about to tell us all about it. This is just the litmus test for how your operations are year round, which you in insurance certainly care about. You're looking at the overall health and safety of the company, the culture, year round because you have to have coverage year round.
Yeah, exactly. So road check, it says it here on the screen, is a diagnostic. It's not just an enforcement event. It's truly telling us what is this carrier, how do they operate over the course of the entire year. Because during that 72-hour period, it's not like, hey, I caught you, from an enforcement standpoint. It's only identifying the problem that's already there. And so if you can correct that problem before road check occurs, don't let that single 72-hour event impact you for the next 24 months from a risk perspective, or from a litigation perspective. Like if that stuff's not there, then you look like a healthy risk from a FMCSA basics standpoint.
Yep.
Mark, I know from your perspective, when you've seen road check, have you seen carriers get violations during those 3 days and then never get those violations again?
I've seen them get violations. I'm not sure that they never get them again. Sometimes they are recurring. So I think there's an ongoing lights, brakes, and tires that's always out there. Unfortunately, some of the carriers and some of the drivers will sit it out and just not participate in road check. I think road check is a really good program. I think it works. I think it brings awareness, and but in terms of if I get a violation, will that eliminate a future violation from occurring? I think sometimes a sloppy operator is a sloppy operator is a sloppy operator, and you got to make a tough
Yeah.
decision on whether or not you want them to continue to work for your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So it does come back to like what Lydia was saying is proactive. Proactive is like the name of the game when it comes to not just surviving road check, because it's not something you should ever have to survive. It should just be a normal way of operating. And so fleets that are going to be investing in safety proactively have more leverage when it comes to insurance. So if you have this 72-hour event and you have no violations, that means your score is going to improve. It's going to show that, hey, there was an increased focus during these 3 days, which means officers were going through with a fine-tooth comb on these trucks. And this carrier had no violations. That means they have a safe operation. And from a telematics point, we can see, hey, you were running during those 3 days, and during those 3 days, you had no violations, and so that looks great and bodes well for your safety record. The lower your CSA scores, the better your renewal outcomes are going to be. Because a fleet that has those low scores or has those preventable doesn't have those preventable violations, we're going to be able to see that, hey, this fleet is managed proactively. They're doing everything they can to prevent violations. But a proactive fleet, you're also going to prevent claims. And so unsafe driving, using telematics to determine if there's following distance or cell phone use, whatever the case is, you're going to prevent claims by being proactive and coaching drivers, having those policies in place, the personal conveyance policies in place. And then really from an insurance perspective, as you talk litigation, Mark, what you've mentioned, what you've seen is if you're doing everything right and you've crossed all your T's and dotted all your I's when it comes to your policies and the usage of your policies, that's going to help out from a litigation perspective. If you do have a claim, then you're covered on the back end of I've done everything right. Here's how the claim occurred. But from a safety side, I'm covered. Just having a policy means nothing if you're not proactively using that policy and holding drivers to it. Really putting yourself in a way of, hey, driver, you did this. Here's the policy. This is what has to happen, and making sure that it's fair across the board, and not, well, this is my senior driver. This is my low tenure driver. Everyone's treated equally across the board, and that policy is adhered to. Because as soon as you don't use that policy, so for example, if you have a policy that says drivers that speed don't get 20 miles an hour over are going to get written up or terminated, whatever the case is there. But then that driver goes and gets in a collision 2 months down the road, and they can point back to that policy and say, well, you had this policy in place. We're not seeing that any training occurred after the fact. Then what was the use of the policy?
Negligence. Bam.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an ugly word in this industry.
Yeah. So I think the big thing for me is be proactive, have your policies and inspection procedures in place today, so that during road check it's just a normal day. You should go into road check not treating it any differently if you are already doing everything you're supposed to today.
Very good. Well, Jonathan, thank you. Mark, thank you. I want to open it up now to questions. I have a hand raised from Susie, and we're going to scroll through chat. While we do that, this is the time. This is the time to prepare. So please don't wait until the day before or the week before. We know it's coming. It comes every year. This should not be a surprise. And really, safe operations should be year-round. So now is the time to get started. If you feel like there are some gaps and you want to do a road check prep review, Jonathan and his team can do that with y'all. Our client success team is always happy to pull fleet safety analysis reports, look at your CSA trends, and give you a sense of how we could apply our catalog of over 850 training videos plus some of your custom content to really get out ahead of that in an ongoing way. So, 2 offers on the table for anyone who's here today. If you'd like to have access to Infinity 30 days free, please, please, please do it. It's the best time to get prepared. If you want to prepare for road check with Jonathan and his team, again, people who've seen it from all sides, who've seen it from enforcement, from the fleet side, and now from insurance too, that would be invaluable time. So please, feel free to take advantage of that. I should have popped the trial. Meanwhile, let's see. Susie, you had raised your hand and to ask a question. I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself so that you can ask the question live if you want. And you might if you're a little nervous about speaking, you feel free to throw it into chat. Oh, mistake. Okay, not a problem. Um, so anything else in chat here? Hey, while I have you guys, how about driver behavior when they're pulled over? Because we didn't talk about that. We talk about the actual mechanics of pre-trips and preparing and the things that you have to have together, but there's a personality, there's a way you need to prepare your personality and your attire and the way you speak. Can you comment on that for a moment?
Yeah, I think from when I was in the enforcement side is
Oh, is that for me?
so I think from like an enforcement side is if when an officer
Uh,
approaches, you both have jobs to do. So the officer has their job to do an inspection. You have the job to move the freight and to work for that trucking company. And those jobs kind of conflict with each other because the officer is supposed to be there to check the vehicle, but you both have the goal of doing it safely. And so if you're doing your job safely, the officer is just double checking your work to make sure that everyone else around you is safe. But whenever an officer makes contact with you, is hey, just be as friendly as possible. You know the officer has a job to do. We're all people. We all have the same things going off in our personal lives, and so we might have had something before the shift or before we jumped in the truck that maybe has our mind or our actions in a different place. And so I would always just say when you're interacting with enforcement official, be as friendly as possible. If they say open the hood, be friendly and open the hood. Help the inspection progress. It's typically going to bode well for the difference between a warning or a citation. Is the friendlier you are and the more apt you are to help the officer, it's going to be friendly. Make sure that you stay in the cab until the officer approaches or tells you to get out. But a big thing, Lydia, is keeping your cab clean. That's really going to show that when the officer gets there, hey, this person's squared away. If the officer asks you for your registration, your insurance, hand them your registration insurance, not just the binder that has 100 different documents and some of it's expired. You might run across an officer that isn't going to ask you for the updated insurance if you handed them a book. And so if you handed them the book and the first thing they come across is an expired insurance, you're probably going to get a violation for expired insurance. And so when you're doing that pre-trip, make sure you have all that information there and just easily be able to hand it to the officer versus the officer having to hunt for it. Same thing goes for the ELD. Know how to use your ELD. The officer, there's hundreds of ELDs out there. The officer's not trained to operate every single one, which is why there's supposed to be an instruction manual. So first of all, driver needs to know how to use the ELD and then be able to teach the officer and provide them the guide on how to use it as well.
I think approachability is the key there, and I've talked to a number of Texas DPS officers, and the first impression is very important. And unfortunately, some of the drivers will and they will start the roadside inspection asking the officer, "Don't you have anything better to do?
Hmm.
Uh, why did you pull me over? I wasn't doing anything wrong." That does not set a good first impression, and that's a trainable event. I think you need to at least attempt to train your drivers on how to conduct yourself during a roadside inspection. And that first impression is a big moment that you can do real well or you can do real poor. I would also ask, we talked a lot about pre-trip, but we got a lot of people online here. Is anybody willing to offer what their best practices for validating drivers doing their pre-trip inspections?
It's a good one. I've heard, of course, hiding the gotcha tag somewhere on the truck, that they might find in the course of a pre-trip, and if you find it, you get $50, $500. It sure has people doing their pre-trips to look for it.
They're just like the rest of the they're you just it's a tough egg. It's a
It
tough one to
is.
it's a tough one to get
Yeah.
right, but
I think that's one of
it
those
needs to
collective
be.
groans we hear.
Yeah.
Well, we have a customer that does something similar to that. And they actually took a stick, got a custom sticker of the owner of the company, and had that sticker, and they would put that on components of the trucks. And it was, yeah, if you took a picture of it and sent it in, that you found a picture of the owner, then you got some type of credit. So kind of a gamification of pre-trips and doing everything right, I think's key, whether you're rewarding a driver for a clean DOT inspection or rewarding them for so many days straight for having a completed DVIR, or you turn that to extra day off, whatever the case is, some type of gamification of doing what they're supposed to do already. I think's great.
Yeah, and that's a great way to frame it too, because so often you hear about gamification and you think, okay, I've got to turn it into a true video game or a mouse going through the maze to get to the cheese. And really, sometimes it's just as simple as something to kind of catch people by surprise or make them laugh, or, with the owner's face on the sticker, it's something that just makes it a little fun, or something to hunt for. It doesn't have to be complicated. I think what works is what's best, even if that's simple. I have Tatiana in here saying a random weekly video them to send, asking from them to send with the equipment. So, yeah, so a video of them like just, capturing that they're doing this. Ed adds a note here on policies and procedures. It's a good practice to go beyond simple acknowledgement, develop some knowledge verification that speaks directly to it. And yes, absolutely, because acknowledgement is good, but to really gauge for comprehension or understanding is even better. Steve, looks like Steve says we use a thing called workflow. They must complete everything before they can move on, and that's within Samsara. So all good thoughts. I think if anyone here masters it, tackles it, and can figure it out, then we got the keys to the kingdom there. So, um, maybe one day we'll hear about it and we'll share it out. But everyone, thank you so much. I hope you are able to prepare adequately for next month. Next week, though, remember, Work Zone Awareness Week, real issue here in the Dallas area and across the country with more and more construction. So be safe out there. I think for us at Infinity, we kind of believe it all comes down to the behavior of employees. If you are being proactive and kind of setting the right standard for the ongoing correct behavior to do the job, whatever that job is, safe driving in this case, then your operation is going to be safer, more profitable. It's just best all the way around. It's going to even help your turnover. So, that comes down to frequent, consistent, and required accountability. So everyone, thank you. Good luck next month. Stay safe next week too with Work Zone Awareness. And if you have any feedback for us on what's working in your prep for road check, please send it in. As a reminder, we will send out a replay of the webinar to everyone. So appreciate you. Mark, Jonathan, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Take care.